particularly if you're working in impact, it's easy to drift, to mission, what they call mission drift, or so just to make sure that your energy is focused in the right direction, because your time and your energy, it doesn't seem like it when you're 27, but it's a pretty important, scarce resource. So making sure that you're doing the most effective things.
Welcome to Increase the Dosage. This is the show that strips away the facade of fake entrepreneurship. It removes the glamour, comes from the trenches, and provides the naked conversations, war stories, lessons learned, and the tools and tricks used by the successful entrepreneurs who overcame their challenges to achieve new growth so that you can too. Now, for your weekly shot of entrepreneurial adrenaline, here is your host, serial entrepreneur and venture catalyst, Chris J. Snook.
Welcome back, everybody. Chris J. Snook here for another episode of Increase Your Dosage. Today, my guest is a longtime friend. I guess it goes almost a decade now, which is hard to believe. Jeremy Wade, calling us from Hong Kong today, but he is based out of India. So we're going to get into his background and story. Jeremy, welcome.
Hey, great to be here, Chris.
Yeah, great to have you, man. So you are currently in Hong Kong at a conference, but are you still living in Delhi, or where are you at present from a full-time standpoint?
Yeah, Delhi, India, most of the year.
And you weren't born there?
Yeah, definitely not. Born in a small town in Oklahoma, the U.S.
And so how does a guy, you kind of are familiar with the show and the format. So what we'll do is, I want to kind of give everybody listening to this, because you've achieved some, amazing things that we'll get to at the end of the show related to cultivating ecosystems and social impact entrepreneurs in important places that really need it, but everywhere needs it, we could argue. But I mean, you're doing this in India, across rural India. You're doing this in Tibet. You're doing this in places where if I said entrepreneurship to people, most people wouldn't even think that was a thing there, or even something that there was a market for there. And so we'll get into that. I teased it a little bit because I want people to make sure they listen to the full episode. And you are doing some incredible stuff. And we're going to talk about some of the research and some of the things you've uncovered about entrepreneurship, both on a global and on a regional scale. But you grew up in Oklahoma. Were you always an entrepreneur? Was entrepreneurship something, even if it was just business ownership, was that something you were raised around? Or tell us a little bit about your backstory.
No, I wasn't always an entrepreneur, I would say. It's interesting. My hometown in Oklahoma, I was born in 1985. Around that same year, the one real industry, the tire factory, Goodrich Tire Factory, closed down. So my hometown, from the time I was born till the time I left for college, was kind of in a slow decline. My parents were very middle class, not business owners. I didn't have very many role models, to be honest, of entrepreneurship. But I did hustle for sure. I had mowed yards and made some income. Worked at a mushroom farm, manual labor on a mushroom farm. Worked at a grocery store, but yeah.
So was education something that was kind of prized in your upbringing? Like, was that something that was instilled in you? Go get a college degree, were you kind of instilled to leave Oklahoma or stay? And like, what was the dynamic there? Was it kind of, hey, no pressure either way?
It was instilled in me a lot of common sense, for sure. And common sense definitely meant getting an education if you wanted to do something outside of a small town work. Yeah, so I was incentivized, I think, by the market as well to figure out a way to move. And education is definitely a ticket to doing that. And absolutely.
And we met through, a mutual friend of ours that you went to undergraduate with at Pittsburg State in Kansas. How did you end up in Pittsburg State?
Yeah, so Pittsburg State, it's kind of it's a good business school in the region. But I actually went there because I wanted to play football. Actually, I was a quarterback in high school and wanted to walk on at Pitt State. Yeah, so similar to Adam as well. Went there and played. Yeah, but unfortunately, my first year, I got injured, but I stayed. It ended up being a great school.
Yeah, and so when you stayed, you were a business major, a math major. I can't remember. You were a business major?
Yeah, business finance. Yeah.
Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do going in, and how did that change, and what did you do when you graduated?
I was open when I went in. I had a brief period where I thought I wanted to change my major to psychology. I got really just fascinated in learning about people. Got exposed to some of the classes in psychology, loved it, but quickly realized that maybe psychology not really a great career path for my interest. So came back to business. Ended up finishing with a double major in business, finance and management, and a double minor in economics and psychology.
Okay, and then you went and worked for one of the most large, organizations you could probably work for if you had a degree in that. So you graduated in '07 or '08, I forget.
'08, yeah. So tough time to graduate in finance, but it was just before the crisis, so it was still not quite clear that finance was going to be a rough path for the next 5 years.
Yeah, because you would have graduated like that May, and so Lehman's bankruptcy, which really triggered
October.
Yeah, so we'd already had Bear Stearns, kind of signaling things were wrong, but in March. But by the time you graduated, it wasn't clear yet whether it was just a blip or whether it was going to be something worse. And so you come out, and when did you get the job? Right away, or did you?
I had two offers when I finished, and interesting, different, divergent paths. One was working with Wells Fargo, and it was going to be selling debt, essentially. And the other one was entry-level bank examiner for the U.S. Treasury. And I actually had a girlfriend at the time who was in Kansas City, and that's where the Kansas City offer was. But the unique thing about the Treasury opportunity was that you could pick where you wanted to go around the world, around the country. And so you gave your top options. And I put essentially the biggest city of opportunity I could find, San Francisco. And I think I had Boston on there and New York. But yeah, that was ultimately the decider when I heard that I had gotten it.
So the entrepreneurial, there was some level of call it opportunist, and call it your just natural need to achieve or ambition or whatever. But there was something where it was like the girlfriend's going to have to move, or she's going to not be the girlfriend because I'm going to Silicon Valley or I'm going to Boston. You ended up going where?
San Francisco.
And so you worked for Treasury and you were doing bank examinations and audits. And so then the market collapses. Fast forward for everybody. Your job is to basically figure out risk and which banks are healthy, which ones need to be either shut down or consolidated, right? Is that in a nutshell kind of what the job was?
Yeah. And a quick sidebar, the Wells Fargo job, about a year in, they shut down the entire unit. So I would have been, I made the right choice in retrospect.
Yeah.
But that was the role. It was, as an entry-level examiner, that's the title, examiner, you start with small community banks. So I did a training period and then moved into an entry-level position after about a year. And you learn everything about the bank. All types of risk. And the idea is that a small bank should be similar to a large bank at scale. So the idea is that you go and you learn the small bank, you learn everything. You should be able to know the large bank as the complexity increases. That's the premise. So I was able to travel, particularly all around the West Coast, but all around the country, and every week a different bank, and every week a different assignment. Incredible opportunity to see small communities. When you go into a bank, a local bank, what we would do is we would look at the biggest sources of risk, which are large loans, small, business loans of people, and seeing just kind of the lifeblood of the community on how it worked, and talk to the bankers, hear those stories. But what was difficult about it is at that time, these communities were struggling seriously in the aftermath of the crisis, but a lot of these communities have been struggling for a long time, and you could see it in these communities. And it was difficult. It was an incredible learning experience. It was also difficult to have to go and deliver pretty rough messages about realities about their solvency.
Because essentially, you were, to like analogize it a little bit and correct me where it's not accurate, but you essentially were going in and doing a health check. So you were like a doctor coming in, and you're looking at the blood pressure and the, and the vitality, the vitals of these banks, and then you got to tell them like where they've got either cancer or where they are going to not have enough liquidity, and where they may need to. In some cases, shut down because they couldn't comply with the new regulations coming out with Dodd-Frank and some of the other things post-crisis, right? I'm fast forwarding a couple of years, but essentially some of the bad news you had to give them was you're either going out of business or you cannot continue to operate this way and be compliant with the law. And so you might have to lay off people, or you might have to cut costs somewhere else. Or what were some examples of the news you had to give that wasn't pleasant?
Yeah, it all revolves for these small banks around how much capital they have relative to their risk. So we would have ways to evaluate their risk. And the primary risk for a bank is their credit risk, so their loan portfolios, those riskier loans, and the likelihood of repayment of those loans, and how much capital that bank has in relation to that. Liquidity, also relevant, but again, credit risk was the key risk in the years as the liquidity crisis kind of abated.
So we met it right around that time, maybe like 2009. I can't remember. I think it was like 2009. We met through Adam, a friend of yours, a friend of mine. We started to get to know each other. We, basically had a glorified book club that I called a mastermind that I was putting together. And we started reading books like The Fourth Turning and Rebecca Costa's Watchman's Rattle and some other ones. And you were at Treasury for about 4 years or 5 years, and then you basically made a really crazy decision. The entrepreneurial side of you came in, but you were on a path where essentially you didn't hate the job, right? Like you said, it was a great learning experience. You said that already, but you it was good. You were living in San Francisco. You had a gig, and you were climbing the ladder, so to speak. What was the fork in the road for you? Like, when did you decide to just say, this isn't going to be the path I want for the next 20 or 30 years?
Yeah, I think it's living in San Francisco. I was traveling during the weeks and seeing these banks, but in the weekends, I was meeting people all the time and hearing kind of about entrepreneurship and about the opportunities in tech, and just the philosophy of San Francisco and about looking at the future, building something was really inspiring. And I, didn't really have the tools or the mindset at that time to really take advantage of that, I think. But I was thinking long-term perspective, where can I, add value, contribute, over the course of my career. And that's, I think, what led me to where I'm at today.
So it's interesting. In one way, San Francisco's DNA of a, region, Silicon Valley, as it were, is part of the catalyst that inspired you to not only think, but also maybe invoke your entrepreneurial tendencies, for lack of a better word, but you didn't stay there. Like a lot of people that are entrepreneurial, they get a hair on their butt to go start something, think they need to move to Silicon Valley. Here you are, you're in Silicon Valley. The reason you have the hair on your butt to do something is because of people just talking about the future all the time. And yet you go to somewhere you've never been, to a university no one's ever heard of. Like, what? Like, how does the choice of like where I could go if I don't stay in San Francisco, how does India and how does Jindal, how does that enter your stream of awareness?
Yeah, it seems like a crazy move, and it definitely was a crazy move. Radical uncertainty, to move to a country that you've never been and don't know anyone. Yeah, crazy, right? But I was looking at it from a calculation of where the future might lead us. So I had a couple of hypotheses about that. One was it's going to be more Asian. There's like absolutely no doubt about that. You're looking at the demographics and the pace of change and the population, and there's too much.
Yeah.
And then I also had a hypothesis that we're going to care more about impact. meaning that I was, and I still have this view that we measure risk, in return primarily. If you think about it from an investor's perspective, I think long term we're going to add impact as another factor, and it doesn't mean that everyone has to optimize for impact, but I think everyone has to be a little bit more cognizant of impact long term. That's my hypothesis. So if you're going to work and learn in the impact space, India is the best place by far.
How did you know that? What year was this? This was 12 or 2013? When was this?
2012.
Yeah, 2012. And then when did you call me? Like you'd already kind of made the decision, or at least you'd already started to execute. Like you had applied to Jindal University for a master's degree.
Right.
And then I forget, did you call me after you got accepted?
Yeah, I think because it was such a crazy thing, I was kind of figuring things out before I was telling anyone. So,
Yeah, because I remember. I mean, it was the first I'd ever heard of it, and we would talk like once a week through that,
right.
Through that conference, phone line stuff, and you'd never mentioned it. And then you said, "Hey, can I call you?" And I'll never forget the call because I guess it was 2013. I remember you saying, "What do you think about something? I want to float something by." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to quit my job at Treasury because I could stay here for the next 30 years, but I think I need to do something different. I'm going to quit my job at Treasury, which is probably crazy. I'm going to pack up all my crap, sell all my crap, take 2 like duffel bags over and go do this doctorate or master's program at Jindal University, which is like a new university, but it's considered to be like the best university in India, and see what happens. What do you think?" And I remember just saying, "I think you're 27. I think you're single. I think if you hate it, you can move home."
Right.
And I remember you going, "Yeah, that's what I'm thinking," and then like next thing you know, you were off. And so what's incredible, and I think the lesson in this is that I don't know whether you think it was gut. I mean, obviously you're a very smart guy. I can say that because I know you better than I know a lot of the guests, but like you're a very intellectual guy. You're well read. But a lot of this was just gut and kind of like you just tapping into a vision you could see maybe clearly as far as directional. Like you knew impact in your mind. You said you knew impact was going to be more important. How important? Doesn't matter. More important. You knew Asia was going to be more important 10, 20, 30 years out. And you were young enough where you thought, well, 10, 20, 30 years from now, whatever it is I want as a net outcome, like whatever status, whatever level of influence, whatever level of accomplishment or impact you've made, you kind of wanted to be in front of that vector. And you also realized it's a marathon because I don't have to be there tomorrow. I've got time, but I also don't have time because now's when I can make these kind of crazy decisions because I'm relatively untethered. And at some point I might become tethered. I might get in a relationship. I might have a kid. Right? Like at some point you might become more tethered because people do. Was that all basically gut? Was it 50-50 gut and head? How do you think you ultimately decided to do it?
Yeah, it's definitely both. I think you just explained it pretty eloquently there. But it was definitely a combination. And I had these reasons, but I mean, these reasons came from some kind of gut level thought that, yeah. And the long-term piece is, I think, the most relevant. Now I've learned living here how hard and long things take. If I think about it, known that at that time, like how the pace of how long things would take, I might have not made the move, but it's probably good that I didn't know.
Yeah. Even if you had known, like, it's also good that you just didn't even probably ask.
Yeah.
Right. You kind of, because it would have paralyzed you and it wouldn't have changed anything. It would just paralyze you. What was the first time? So you make the decision and you're ready to go. You moved. It was relatively quickly, if I remember right. I don't remember now because it's been over 10 years, but I remember you saying you're going to do it. And then like, it wasn't that long and you were on a plane, right? Because I think it was like for fall semester or something, right? You had to like start your studies or something.
Yeah.
So you start heading over there, meaning like you've committed to go. So now you've kind of burned the ships. You're probably excited because most people, when they make a decision and they feel good about it, right? They get excited. When was the first time that doubt creeped in?
Yeah.
Did I make the right decision? Like, because it could have been a year later. It could have been on the way to the airport. It could have been when you landed in Delhi. When was the first time where you went, holy shit, what did I just do?
Yeah, a small moment for sure. So, I mean, when I got off the plane, and you haven't been to India yet, you got to make the trip. But it's just insane level of like sounds and noises and smells, and so it's stimulus to the extreme. So I mean, I was just so experiencing that was fascinating. But what the moment that got me was when I moved into the flat I was going to be staying. About 2 minutes into getting there, power cut, and and like it was pretty hot at the time. It was in the summer.
Yeah.
And the fans, everything goes off. Like nothing's working for like 2 or 3 minutes. I'm like, okay, this is serious. And so that was one moment. But I had made a decision that I'm going to make this work. And I think internalized the idea that also the value of kind of the struggle of it was also part of what I was seeing as also valuable, because I had this, I guess, a hypothesis at the time too, that this value of adapting, if I can handle this, I can handle anything, so this was definitely in my calculus for the first few years, still is to some degree.
So you had kind of mentally prepared yourself that I'm not going to welcome unnecessary struggle, but struggle is going to be part of why this is a good decision for me.
Yeah.
Because you kind of do you feel like you knew that's just the way nature operates and that humans are designed, or was it more like you wanted to train yourself? Was it a life skill you felt vacant in?
Yeah, I think definitely something I want to train myself in. And I think Americans in general have this deficit of, if you compare other cultures, where things come very easy in the US, and a place like India, things don't come so easy. And I think there is a value in having that, particularly for someone like me who wants to develop some of the skills and attributes that help you be successful as an entrepreneur. I think that's one that's pretty helpful to, one, to just be adaptable, but also to be more, to listen better, like whether you're listening to the market or you're listening just, so you have, like going to India, I had to be much more observant.
I think what's interesting is because this is a multiple phase journey to something super entrepreneurial, because I think what you're doing now, what you're helping others do is the pure essence of entrepreneurship, right? You're literally creating something from nothing. And you've been doing that now for the last 5 years with JSiE, which we'll talk about in a second, but that's not why you went to India, right? So in other words, you go get a job at Treasury, you pick San Francisco because you want to be in a city where stuff's happening. San Francisco kind of enlightens you, inspires you, triggers these entrepreneurial tendencies. But really the next step for you is to think, okay, well, if we're going to be thinking about the future, what do I think about the future? And based on all these different inputs, probably things you'd read, things you'd talked to, things you'd looked at, you decide the future is Asian, the future is impact, the future has these elements that are less talked about today. We're in an environment where we're still in the middle of the Great Recession / the financial crisis of 08. Now it's maybe 010, 11, starting to tick back up. But for the most part, because of your vantage point, we're not getting any healthier. So you go to India and you embrace struggle as part of the value, but it's still this, you're not like, you didn't go there to start a business. You're still in school, right? So you're getting this degree. At what point did you decide to start JSiE? What was the catalyst to go that way?
Yeah, it's a good point. When I went there, going for the degree was partly the degree. It was partly the university, but primarily it was, a way into the country and a way to evaluate what was possible. Yeah, I was about a year into being there that I started to be able to even think about opportunities. So just the first year is just figuring out how things work and trying to understand
how to keep the lights on and right. Yeah. How to get internet. Right.
Yeah, totally.
And some of that year you were in other markets too. Didn't you spend like 8 weeks or something in Beijing?
So I was really open to exploring, broader than India too. Yeah, I took an internship pretty quickly, like a few months in Beijing, and in an investment banking role where it was looking at clean energy projects. And I also did research projects with the U.S. Treasury or U.S. State Department. They had this program where you support diplomats in different missions through research projects. So I did a couple of research projects in that. So I was pretty open at that time.
That was a cool little hack too. I might get this wrong, but I remember you saying because you were a student at Jindal, which was an Indian university, you were able to go to Harvard, and take classes or something. Am I making that up, or is that something that you were able to access through that whole?
Yeah, not Harvard, but I was able to go to a European university.
Okay.
Called Leuven, and a good one of Europe's best universities. Definitely, I think the best university in Belgium. It was the cost, like the thing with U.S. higher education just being absolutely expensive. An Indian university is pretty smart. I mean, I was able to finance that entire degree, with pretty minimal.
I think you told me it was like 2 months of your living expenses in San Francisco bought your entire first year in India. And it included like your education and everything, right?
Yeah, everything. Yeah. So that was.
So, all right. So then you're in, now you're kind of settled. You get how India works at a base level. You know how to operate, you know how to live, you know how to exist and do the things that a 28-year-old needs to be able to do or wants to do. And now your brain starts to go up a notch to what are the opportunities that I could help fill? And so, so you begin that journey. And at this point are you meeting people inside the university through these internships? How did you pitch them the idea? Because essentially you are, for those who didn't read the title card, the founding director of Jindal Centre for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which is a on-campus incubator for social entrepreneurs. And it didn't exist before you. And now it's in its 5th year, and we're going to talk about some of the amazing things it's accomplished. But how did you pitch that? Who did you pitch that to? How did you capitalize it? What was the path to launching a startup basically inside of I don't even know what to call it, a university system, because it's not really government, right?
And one thing to keep in mind about the university, it's kind of a startup itself. It was still a new university. So yeah, you don't typically think of that universities being new, but in India, they're building universities all the time because there's such a demand.
How many years had it been around when you started? A couple, right?
Like 3 or 4.
I think because it was a CSR initiative of Jindal Steel or Jindal.
Yeah.
The big, family wealth company there.
Yeah.
So by the way, I just read that it made the top 50 universities worldwide this year or something.
The top 150
or top 150
young universities under 50 years. And it's the youngest on the list. So yeah, one thing about the university, which I didn't fully grasp, but I think I sensed before I came, was that it was very ambitious university in terms of, what it wanted to do. So I think that kind of ties into me making the pitch to them on this too. So my approach was, looking at the university as a place that kind of breeds entrepreneurship. If you look, even in San Francisco with Stanford, you look at a lot of good entrepreneurial ecosystems have good universities embedded in those places. So with this thought too, could we, at the university develop this entrepreneurial ecosystem, this approach to supporting entrepreneurs? This is the pitch that I kind of crafted, but my approach was to talk to all the stakeholders at the university over a course of about 6 months, just kind of floating the idea, getting their feedback, revising aspects of it, and then just crafting this pitch to the vice chancellor, the key decision maker. And they agreed. It's an inclusive process to bring in people from across the university before I made the pitch. But
I think some people, just because of not understanding how universities work, and I certainly don't, might think that because you pitched it to a university, like once they said, yes, go build us this center on campus, that you basically then created a job for yourself. Really, you just got the blessing to go do it. And I would summarize, because I remember you telling me, I don't know if you're still doing this, but I know you built the website yourself. I know you built a lot of the assets yourself. So it was every bit a startup for you, right? And I don't know how much capital it took or how you raised that capital, but anything you can or are willing to share there, I think is good background, because it wasn't like the university said yes and then this thing just miraculously appeared in the fall.
Yeah, far from it. Yeah, I think really all that it meant was when I pitched it, they said yes. It meant like they kind of wouldn't get in, like they didn't provide any resource to do it. They just, okay, you can do it.
They gave you the blessing that you can now tell people that we're endorsing you, but you have to basically still go do it all. So the asset that they gave you was like, you can now say, hey, I'm building the first official Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center on Jindal University's campus. And they would say, yeah, he is. But you right? Like that was really what they gave you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's partly because it wasn't necessarily in the core mission of the university, especially, a university that's starting up. They had to focus on getting high quality students. They got to focus on getting good faculty there. They couldn't spend a lot of time, working on this. And the way I approached it and the way I pitched it is that, there will be a focus at the university, but the vision and the mission for JSiE is in the region. It's, outside the university. It's even global. That required I had to raise financing outside the university while harnessing the resources on the university to the best that I can. It primarily meant financing everything outside.
And so where did you go for that? You went in 2014, you started it officially.
That's right.
And the first product offering, if there was a product offering, was you were going to organize. What was the first product offering? I don't even know. Was it the challenges? Was it like business pitch coaching? Like what was the first offering that you went to market with at the incubator?
Yeah, the very first there was two. So the incubator was definitely the core focus at the beginning. And I spent a little bit of time trying to understand the ecosystem around incubators in the country and particularly in Delhi NCR. At that time, now there's quite a bit of incubators in India and in Delhi, but at the time it was a pretty new concept. So I was a little bit early, to be honest. I wanted to partner with an existing incubator and like seed financer of social entrepreneurship in the country, but I couldn't structure it in a way that made sense for the university. The very first thing we did actually is the thing that's probably the most interesting thing we're still doing is supporting Tibetan entrepreneurs. So around the same time of the launch, the Tibetan government in exile. So it's in India, but recognized as the government, and they have a parliament as well. They had decided on focusing on entrepreneurship. So maybe a quick history on that is 1959, the Dalai Lama and a large group of Tibetans, they fled Tibet when the Chinese were coming into Tibet at that time. And India gave them refuge and gave them land. So there's 39 different settlements, so pieces of land in different parts of the country that India gave the Tibetan people. In a world where we're seeing refugee crises in different places, this is an example of a really long-term situation where it's been over 50 years.
Yeah.
But those communities have struggled, particularly economically, to create jobs and entrepreneurship. So the idea was to develop entrepreneurship. So we partnered with the government, essentially, the government in exile, to help them create incubation programs for Tibetans living in India. So we did the first batch of that in early 2015. We started JSiE in late 2014. So this was our first actual entrepreneurial programming was working with these Tibetan entrepreneurs. So we had them on the campus. So we had them. I built a space on the campus, and they came for what was 2 months of programming.
You built the space, meaning like the university rented you space or gave you space, and then you had to do tenant improvements to it or put in desks, or like, what were some of the details? What did you?
There wasn't like a proper center at that time. We have one now, but yeah, not at that time. Yeah.
So they came in, and what did they do all day?
Yeah. So we designed it so that I tried to bring in as many different outside experts that I could bring in, for either from the faculty or otherwise, to give 1 hour sessions and then do Q&A. So my approach and our approach with the Tibetan program is to try to give exposure to a variety of ideas as they, at this early stage, because these are idea based. Very few had done anything in the market, and some of them didn't even know what entrepreneurism even was. Like, that word was new to them even. So it was very, very early stage. So just giving them exposure with ideas about talking to other entrepreneurs.
So they would hear from other entrepreneurs from around the world or even the region. They would hear from faculty members, business people, things like that. And these would be mentor-ish kind of sessions with some kind of theme, whatever that person's, strength was or thing was. And then they would ask whatever questions they did. And so that was kind of the content output.
Right.
Was there a design to it as far as the range of topics covered, or was the first year more whatever you could get that obviously would add value? And then have you refined it since then? Like, is there now, I don't want to call it a curriculum, but is there now a program that the bodies and mentors may change, but there's like a thing you move people through as a system?
Yeah, it changed. Yeah, definitely. So this year was the 5th year we ran it, and for the first year we returned the program back to the government. So they now have launched a space. They have a space, and we did a train the trainers program. So now there is a curriculum of essence, but again, it's adaptable. Each batch, each group of entrepreneurs is different, but there's principles and there's approaches that make a lot of sense.
I saw the post when it opened. Where is it, in the Himalayas? Where is it? It was high.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so where the Tibetan government in exile is in Dharamsala, which is up in the mountains. It's not. I think it's 5,000, 6,000 feet. So it's for the Himalayas. That's not very high.
I was wondering, because I'm like, dude, you might have the Guinness Book. Before, when I was preparing for this interview, I was like, I got to ask him if he's got the Guinness Book of World Records for like the highest altitude incubator. That'd be a good, tagline. Like, I thought it was in like Nepal or something. I'm like, well, maybe it's at like 14,000 feet or something crazy. Like, it's the death zone incubator. Like, so it's in India, and it's about 5,000-6,000 feet, and now it's on their sovereign land that they've been given. So you've returned it to them.
Yeah.
So how does it feel like? And don't, I'm not asking this as a leading question. I'm just curious. Like, it was a 5-year thing. I remember reading the post and just not being aware that was opening, because we haven't seen each other since, I don't know, May or whenever we were in Grand Cayman together. And I remember reading it and just thinking like, just as a friend, thinking like, wow, man, like, good for him. Like, this is so awesome. And it was part of why I was like, I got to get him on the show, because I just think your story is just there's so many things that, that I think are important about your story. And I know it's just beginning. So it was kind of like, how did it feel? Like, was it a big deal for you? Was it anticlimactic? Like, a lot of these things are. Just what were the emotions when you realize that this 5-year thing you've done, like, now is more permanent? It's kind of been scaled to a point where now it's like making an impact, to your earlier point, because it's going to continue. Did it kind of wash over you? Did it like, yeah, that's the whole point, it took too damn long? Like, what was the emotion?
It's a good question. It definitely felt good, but when you say this idea of permanent, that, I mean, it's a powerful word. Yeah, nothing feels so permanent with this program or otherwise. But the difficulty of making something like that have some substance and stick. So everything. I mean, that's true of the Indian market. Things are in flux and moving. Everything's developing. Yeah, it felt good for sure to see that program, have this long term kind of rooted piece for sure. Working out for 5 years, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, yeah.
So I said permanent on purpose. I probably figured out.
Yeah, it's a good word, especially with Tibetan Buddhism. They have this idea of impermanence. That's like so.
Well, and I think, and I didn't know that, but I think that the nature of being an entrepreneur is there's no such thing as permanence. The only permanence is whether or not you're going to continue to adapt, which I think is a great word you said early on in this interview. Adaptation, like our ability to adapt and see the market for what it is and what it could be, not see it worse than it is, not see it better than it is, just see it for what it actually is, and then what it could be. And then what we can do to then go take advantage of that situation. And hopefully in your, most people's cases, leave it better than it was before we got there. So where do you go from here? What's your entrepreneurial journey now that you have spent the last, decade there doing things, but the last 5 years has been really steeped in social impact, cultivating entrepreneurs, realizing how hard it is to get them remotely close to traction, realizing how impermanent all of it can be, but how important it all can be, because I know you're driven by that. I think you're driven by a purpose that you haven't, maybe I should give you a chance to even articulate if you kind of are clearer on it now. But where do you go from here, and how do you get through your days?
Yeah, so with JSiE, it's definitely something it's important to me that the vision of it, and it continues. And I think I've realized that my journey probably needs to take a turn, but I want to make sure that it continues. So this is where I'm at right now, is figuring this out. How do you transition this to whether it's I can bring in someone that can take over a lot of what I do now day to day, whether it's I can raise a more long-term source of funding. I didn't talk too much about that earlier, but yeah, so most of the funding has been project to project, a lot of bootstrapping. So we are healthy to do projects, but not healthy to.
There's no endowment. There's no endowment that just feeds you, right?
Exactly.
And so let's talk about that, because one of the innovations, and again, innovation in the sense of the business model innovation for you, was MOOCs and massive open online courseware. I assume when you say projects, that's an example of a project that helped feed some of these other things. Yes?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we got 2 large grants to design massive open online courses on the platform FutureLearn, which was probably the 3rd largest. It's Europe's largest MOOC platform.
And so these are things like people have probably heard of Udemy or Coursera. FutureLearn is in that ilk, right?
Exactly. Yeah. About, I think, just short of 10 million users and growing, and extremely global. So our first package of MOOCs had people from 159 different countries taking the MOOC. So incredibly global.
And the course was on social enterprise?
Social enterprise. Yeah, it was 3 courses packaged together in a program that you could get a certificate in. And it was an introduction to the topic. What does it even mean? What does it even mean to embed impact in a business model? So just the introduction to the topic. Then the second was, how do you start a social enterprise? And the third was about, how do you grow a social enterprise? And what was unique about the way we did this is it wasn't me talking about it, for sure. It was entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs from all over the world, different markets, essentially telling their story, and we turned it into video case studies. What was great about that is you had global case studies and global learners, and made for really kind of enriching learning experience for me too, to watch it happen and see all the comments, because it's designed in a social learning way. So it's a lot of peer-to-peer learning. You're just a facilitator, essentially, when you create something like this. Yeah, it turned into like also a source of data. So for us from our business model or from our organizational model, the data that comes from those kind of courses, when you have 50,000 people register and all the comments, and we turn that into research outputs. We turn that into stakeholder engagement opportunities. So we did first social enterprise, and then more recently we did impact investing. So looking at both sides of that market, right? And we are in the third, run of the impact investing course, and it's available. It's available now. I think the next time it will run in August.
And you brought in partners / I'll call them sponsors or underwriters, like looking at British Council, Middlesex University of London. You got this as an elective inside of the Jindal Global Business School for students that wanted to take it in their BBA or their MBA program. So you started to integrate this asset once it was created. The grant money helped you create it and market it. You went out to market with it publicly, 159 countries, 14,000 some odd learners. But then you started to integrate it into other places where it could get used up or consumed. And then did you fund future versions of the courseware with sponsorship like Middlesex, or what was their role?
Yeah, so the first one was a British Council grant. So the British Council, they had a program focused on expanding social knowledge around social enterprise in India. So that was the first source of funding. And then we partnered with Middlesex University, university in the UK. And then we had a third partner, which was essentially like a documentary film company that had a mission around. They were a social enterprise themselves. So we brought these people together, very collaborative project to harness these, this video footage into case studies, and then meet the British Council's mission of, getting knowledge about social enterprise at scale. So that was the first one. The second one was bringing an impact investor. One of the first and most well-known domestic impact investors. A lot of impact investment in India is international sources of funds coming into India, but our partner Asha Impact was domestic source. So they were pooling capital in India together, and they also had a think tank aspect to their work and advocacy work with the government and trying to help build that ecosystem for impact investment. So they were a great partner. And then through them, we brought in some other content partners, outreach partners from the ecosystem, and made it really something valuable for impact investing to get out some of the knowledge. And again, it's case study driven. Impact investors, the actual investors, talking through their strategies, their approaches.
So I think, I want to summarize a couple of the data that's in your annual report. People can find this, by the way, if they go to JSiE.in, which is the website. You can learn everything about what the Institute does, the center does, and also Jeremy's team and his research and what they've been able to do. So I encourage you to go check that out. But I want to, as we wind up, the last couple of minutes here, I want to shift gears on top of this, though. I want to build from here, but I want to shift gears back to you for a minute. So a couple of things that I thought were really amazing, and I commend you for this, because I know it's a drop in the bucket, but every drop in the bucket is a ripple out and or drop in the stream, as they say, the pebble in the stream. And I think these are significant. 80% of women social enterprise founders reported experience increased confidence and sense of self-worth. And I think that's a big number, right? I mean, whether they become a unicorn or not is not the point. It's the idea that social impact from entrepreneurial or enterprise, starting up creates a different level of self-worth and identity than other things do. 33% of all the social enterprises in India specifically focused on empowering women and girls as beneficiaries, which, if you know anything about that culture, is a major shift. So I think, I commend you on behalf of, I know this work has got to continue, and that's your goal, is to help find it a place where it can continue to grow and not be solely dependent on your energy and output. And that's every entrepreneurial's, job, is to figure that out. Where would you like to, or where are you kind of looking to go from here personally as you expand your sphere of things you're involved in, because you've got some of this now supported by people that don't require you there every second of every day. And so where do you feel like you want to go next? And what is an ask of our community, of the listeners, that if they wanted to connect with you, they could go where to find you and best interact with you? What initiatives or what are the things that you're interested in today, that if they're working on them or if they have contacts that they might want to make introductions to? Like, what are you up to next and how can we support you? What's your ask?
Yeah. So next, taking the learnings from working with entrepreneurs and working with investors, what's next is looking at something we've started, a venture studio. So outside the university, continue to harness the university's entrepreneurial ecosystem and things that we built, but also have a company that can take forward some of those good ideas and help develop them, help raise capital. So looking at venture studio model towards venture capital, possibly down the road.
Is there a name for that yet?
Yeah. Armadillo Digital.
Okay, Armadillo Digital.
Yeah, that's the
cool
for the venture studio. So building that slowly as we learn, and again, just building off of things that we're doing, now in the ecosystem, and trying to take those initiatives forward. Looking at technology entrepreneurship, also looking at impact. So both, as different opportunities continue to emerge in India and in the region.
You think you'll stay in India as a hub for quite some time? I know you travel quite a bit, so you've gotten accustomed to it now. You've made it home. Do you have any sense of that?
It's hard to leave, for sure. There's too much opportunity, but I'm definitely open to the region, open generally. So we'll see. I'm not gonna say for sure yet what's gonna happen, but definitely India's exciting for some time. So it'll be hard to leave.
2 final questions. So the first one is, gosh, how old are you now?
34.
34. So was it 7 years ago, or were you younger than that when you left? You left in 13. Oh yeah. So yeah, that makes sense. So you left in 13. You're talking to the 27-year-old you now. I think it's obvious that you'd probably say, you made the right choice, but what would you say do different if you could look back? What would you do different? And then the last question is, what would you say to someone, regardless of their age, that has got a crazy idea that makes no sense to anyone else around, but their gut is telling them to do it? What would you tell them to do? So you can finish with that one.
Sure. What would I tell myself? I think to set clear goals, like particularly if you're trying to start something, build something, setting clear, whether OKRs, KPIs that are clear and help you assess whether you're moving in the right direction. Particularly if you're working in impact, it's easy to drift, to mission, what they call mission drift, or so just to make sure that your energy is focused in the right direction, because your time and your energy, it doesn't seem like it when you're 27, but it's pretty important, scarce resource. So making sure that you're doing the most effective things.
Do you honestly though? Do you? I know that's what the 34-year-old thinks. It's certainly what the 43, almost 44-year-old in me focuses on now. But do you really think that would have gotten you any better difference? Like, can you think of people that you met that you only met because you drifted and you went somewhere that didn't make sense to a plan, or you traveled, or you went to a meetup group?
I think you got to balance that. So you don't want to over optimize.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between the US and the Indian market too. You actually you can't over optimize here. It's not actually even reasonable. Everything's so unpredictable. So yeah, it's context. I think a little bit there is also relevant. Yeah. You want to balance it. You definitely want to be open. My journey is I've been so open, the last 7-8 years with this.
And I default that way too. I don't want to give anybody advice. Honestly, I just want to share what I've seen in you, I mean, you have accomplished a tremendous amount, and for a lot of people that otherwise wouldn't have benefited from it. And I'm inspired by that personally. And I think that you've done that because you didn't know exactly what you were supposed to do. You kind of took the opportunity, you certainly squeezed the hell out of it, and then you found the next thing. And I think, whatever Armadillo ends up doing will kind of be a tightened version of that process, because now you know your style better than you did 27. Like, you now have an entrepreneurial style, Jeremy Wade, that Jeremy Wade 27 didn't even know was a thing, right? But I think I have a style now, but it's only a style for me now because of 19 years of defaulting into other people's styles and bouncing off walls, right? Finding what actually was my style. And I hope that I'll continue to do that. Like, I hope that I don't get stodgy and dead in my style either. I mean, that's kind of, it's always tough, right, to look backwards. But the simple question to finish with is, someone calls you up today and is nervous, scared to make the decision, whether it's to leave their job or whether it's to start a business or whether it's, what would you tell them? And then what would you arm them with to help them navigate the first couple stages to sustainability of that life?
Yeah, I think have the big ideas clear, to our earlier, points about KPIs versus being open. I think you want to have you want to be moving at least directionally clearly, but so have the big ideas clear, but don't get so attached, if you can, it's to the short-term outcomes. Think about the process as much as possible, what you're doing, and the big ideas, and try to force yourself to think about long-term. Is this a good decision? Will I care about this a year from today, 2 years from today? As hard as that is when you're living at the beginning of something really new, and everything seems monumental, just because everything's so uncertain. You have very few things to grasp on, when you're doing something so new.
I think you absolutely did that. I mean, you made a comment somewhere in the first 10 or 15 minutes of this talk where you said, when I made the decision to go, I was very clear on why it made sense to me. Like, I didn't know all the details. I didn't really, but you said that you were anchored in it. Like, there was a certainty that this is directionally right. And I think that's the takeaway, which is my version of plus oneing what you just said is, if you have that, you can almost not worry about drift, right? Because in my experience, it's the same thing. Like, I have gone so many different directions and bounced off walls and felt like, because pragmatics of having to pay bills or having something go away that you thought was solid, and now you're in reactionary mode trying to save jobs, save your house, save like all the crap that happens to people throughout their journey, depending on how long they've been on it, right? Someone gets sick in the family, now there's more bills. There's like all these things that you can't control. And once you make this leap to do something entrepreneurial and you're literally like funding everything, bootstrapped or otherwise, directionally you can get knocked off course momentarily. And as someone who's ready to make that leap and who may worry about that, it's like macro lock in on 10, 20, 30 years, the direction you're going to be in, where you're going to end up. And then deal with pragmatics as they come, right? Because sometimes I think, we worry that if we deal with the immediate need, we're going to somehow get off track, or the immediate need we make bigger than it actually is because we're not centered on where we're actually going. And then we obsess about, how this is taking us off track, but we actually never were even on a track. Because I think you'd agree with me. Nothing can really take you off track at this point, except not deciding what you want to end up.
Absolutely. I think, it's for me, it's getting clarity too on these long-term, bigger directional things. And for me, often when I dedicate time to doing the kind of things that help me get clear, I end up just realizing there's just too much noise of things that don't matter that are kind of getting in the way of the clarity of that. So that's, for me, getting clear and just, reminding yourself about the longer term, bigger picture aspects of what you're doing helps you make better, more clear decisions in the short term too.
Well, we'll have to do another chat, you and I, on another day. But I do know you've created a habit. I would call it a habit because I've only seen it through Instagram or through other things. But you've done these digital detoxes, and you've made it a habit since you've been living over there to go to the Himalayas or go somewhere and basically, I don't even say meditate because some people meditate, some people don't, but essentially unplug yourself for 10, 12 days. And I would imagine that that's one way that you center and kind of calm things down so that you can get rid of all the noise that you've maybe even created in your own head. And so I'm inspired to create that as a habit more frequently myself this coming year. And I think you've been an example to that for me. And I'm assuming it works because I see it working for you. So
yeah.
Anyway, buddy, it's so great to see you. No one can see you and me on camera. We can see each other. They're just hearing the audio but it's great to see your face and hear your voice as always. I appreciate you coming on. And I know on behalf of everyone listening to this that you've opened up people's eyes to what's possible. And I think anyone who's thought about taking a leap or maybe took a leap and is wondering whether they made the wrong decision is probably drawn some strength and some needed certainty from listening to you explain your journey. So I appreciate and acknowledge you for sharing your wisdom on the road as you've learned it with your fellow peers.
Awesome. Yeah, this is great, Chris. It was good to talk with you.
All right, buddy. Talk soon. And anyone wants to connect with you online, what's the best place?
Yeah, maybe Twitter. J Wade Jeremy.
J Wade Jeremy. All right, we'll get that in the show notes too. Thanks, my friend. Take care.
See you, Chris.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Increase the Dosage. To read the full show notes for this episode, which includes any links mentioned, as well as a few quotes for sharing on social media, head on over to increasethedosage.show. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Startup Drugs. That's drugs with a Z. Have an amazing week.